Hey, everybody. This episode of Our Kids Play Hockey is brought to you by our title sponsor, NHL Sense Arena. Look, we all want our kids to succeed in hockey, but let's face it, finding training that's both effective and enjoyable can be a real challenge, and not to mention expensive and a total drain on time, especially if you have to drive to the rink, pay a private instructor. There's so many reasons that money gets spent on this game. But that's where NHL Sense Arena steps in. It's a virtual reality training game that brings the rink into your home that takes off-ice training to a new reality. It's designed to improve hockey sense and IQ, something that's lacking majorly in the game today for both players and goalies. And you get unlimited access to over 100 drills and training plans from top coaches and players that can be played anytime, anywhere, with drills approved by USA Hockey player and goalie development directors. Look, improving mental hockey skills at home has really never been more fun, and any hockey player that uses this is going to have a blast. All right. I've used this before on my own, and it feels like you're so immersed in an arena, you sometimes forget you have a headset on. And again, it's not being on the ice, but it allows you to work on some of these skill sets like scanning, as I said before, hockey IQ, looking around the rink, making the right plays, that getting those repetitions in now as a hockey player are super important for your development. So NHL Sense Arena is giving all the listeners an exclusive offer for $50 off an annual plan when you use our code Hockey Never Stops at checkout. Again, that's Hockey Never Stops. All you got to do is go to hockey.sensearena.com. Again, that's hockey.sensearena.com. Use the code Hockey Never Stops, and you'll save $50 on your annual plan of NHL Sense Arena. Make sure to check that out and enjoy this episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. You know, we talk about mental fitness a lot on the show. In today's episode, we talk about tools that you can utilize to help you on the bench as a parent, and kind of the mission upon all of us to further the conversation at minimum on how this affects our kids, not just becoming better people, but helping us win hockey games, right? That's at the end of the day what we all want, but I think we want them to become better people the most. So we have on Paula McQuaid and Jessica Renney with us today, owners of Hone Athletic, to talk about this really fantastic conversation. I know it feels like I say that every week, but we're having a lot of fantastic conversations. And again, look, we're getting to that time of the year where the gift-giving season's coming up. I want you to head over to hockeywraparound.com, check out their off-ice tools and some of the new things that they've done, the children's book that they've written by Christy Casciano Burns and Lee Elias. That's me. Check it out at hockeywraparound.com. Use the code OKPH at checkout. You'll get a nice little discount there. It's a great way to support us and the show. And finally, humbly asking you, wherever you listen to this show, please give us that 5-star review. It really, really helps us spread the word, whether it's on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It is a really easy way to support the show. Giving us those reviews and those written reviews helps us spread the message, in addition to you telling all of your friends about it, what you do all the time, and we appreciate you. With all that said, let's dive into this episode with Paula McQuaid and Jessica Renney on mental fitness in action on Our Kids Play Hockey. Hello, hockey friends and families around the world, and welcome to another edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. I'm Lee Elias, joined as always with Mike Benelli. You know, we talk a lot on this show about the importance of mental fitness and keeping your mind as healthy as your body. So today, we have two guests joining us that are experts in that space in hockey. Paula McQuaid is a mental performance consultant for Hockey Canada's women's U18 national team, winning 2 golds, silver, and bronze medals with the teams in the IIHF World Championships since 2018. We're also joined by Jessica Renney, who has a unique perspective of the game, having spent most of her life close to the NHL, witnessing the importance of mental fitness to professional athletes who operate in high-performing cultures. Both Paula and Jessica are professional members of the Canadian Counseling and Psychotherapy Association, a nationally accredited body in Canada, and are founders of Hone Athletics, which is a unique digital platform that empowers sports leaders with the technology and expert guidance needed to create healthy, happy, high-performing athletes, something we love here on this show. We will dive into that much more on the show today. Ladies, welcome to Our Kids Play Hockey.
Thank you. Nice to be here. It's exciting.
It's nice to have you. Yeah, we've been planning this episode for months, so I'm excited it's finally here. So thank you both for here. Paul, I'm going to start with you real quick because I said in the open, I know our audience, I know what they like to hear about. So let's just start with your experience with Canada's U18 team, your role of mental performance consultant. What does that mean? What are some of the challenges you've seen? And if you can even begin to try and describe the medal, you know, winning a medal, what that is like for you. It's undescribable, but I always like to try.
Yeah, that's a great question. So what does it mean? The NPC role that I've played has been phenomenal. It's something that I kind of wasn't didn't know that I would be going in that direction. And coming from a therapeutic background, it kind of lends itself a little bit differently to that position. So I was able to kind of do the typical things that a mental performance coach would do, but also go into that. I have that therapeutic background. So I think personally, I think that marries really, really well in sport, especially when we're dealing with younger individuals. Um, in terms of what it's like to win a medal, depends which ones you're talking about.
That's fair. That's
Some
a
of
fair point. Yeah.
so, however, let you get as much learning, regardless which it is. And over the years, I've been lucky enough to do it for, I think it was 6 years, and you you recognize how you yourself shift in this role. So while the athletes, they were all U18, so they're kind of in a similar space. So year after year, you have amazing groups of young women dealing with very similar things. However, my opportunity to evolve really happened throughout those years, and especially seeing like after COVID. So a lot of things happened after that where these players hadn't played for years. And then so the things that we didn't even think of, like thinking about how come we're seeing so much emotion or what's going on here. And it was such a stage that they hadn't been on in years, which was a cool opportunity as well. So being mindful of the stuff they're going on and how their world and how their environments impact them. I will speak to you about the last gold medal we won.
There you go. That sounds like a
And
happy memory. Yeah.
yeah, well, for us it was.
Right. Yeah. Not for us, but for you,
No.
well, for the purposes of the show, we'll just say it's happy for everyone
Thank
right
you.
now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was intense as it always is. And it was very neck and neck. And usually you guys pull it out. So you're never relaxed and sitting shoulder to shoulder, literally, with the other team's people. And it was about, we were all kind of excited and cheering, and about down to the last minute or 2 minutes, we just stopped talking. There was nothing. Everyone was just sitting there. And then, of course, the buzzer went, and we were thrilled and excited and jumping together. And you're just so pleased for the girls. You're so pleased for their parents, everybody that's there supporting them, the country, and the team around the team who's been there since the start. So yeah, it's pretty amazing.
You know, we always talk about the greatest rivalries in sports, and people say Yankees, Boston, or whatever. And I always say, like, USA, Canada, women's hockey, not only does it span now generations and decades, but age groups like this, it's an eternal battle. And again, I think it's one of those things that unfortunately in the media, they don't do the best of really diving into, like, showing how much this means. And then also the level of preparation. You talked about COVID, and I remember the women's national team wearing masks in one game, and that they had trained to do that. We had someone on tell us that they had trained for that. So the level of preparation, dedication, and everything that goes into it is at the highest of the highest levels, right? I'm not talking men or women's sport. I'm just talking in general right now. You bring up a good point about COVID too. I'm still uneasy and freaked out generally that as a society, and I'm talking, North America, we just kind of finished it and moved on and never talked about it. And it's a little bit weird that we don't talk about it, considering that the entire world shut down for 3 years. And then especially with our children, who we asked to sit in front of a TV or a computer for 3 years, and then we wonder why they have problems communicating now. So kudos to both of you, obviously, for bringing that up. Jessica, I want to get your thoughts on that too, and then I have a question for you.
You bet. I was just thinking to myself, have we moved on? Have we? Right? Like, how do we?
That's a great question.
How do we know? When I think about kind of bringing it back to mental health, and Paul and I have always talked about COVID being the echo pandemic, or mental health being the echo pandemic of the physical pandemic. And certainly we can talk more about that. But if we look at kind of the mental health of our young people, and those who are needing support. And I read a stat the other day, actually, that said, we have, let's say, 300,000 mental health providers. I think it was in the US, actually. And we have 1.2 kids registered in sport. So there's a massive need for our kids to be getting the support they need.
100%.
And how can we use sport as that vehicle to provide them with that mental health support that they need? And we obviously certainly think that we can do that. But just looking at the need versus, you know, our world's capacity to respond to the need in the way that the narrative that we've always kind of adopted, which is individually, we're really wanting people to look at how we can do this differently,
right,
to make sure that, you know, a coach or a sporting leader can have the impact on that young person's mental health, rather than waiting for a psychiatrist or psychologist appointment to have that mental health impact.
Yeah. Also, you know, the stigma surrounding mental health is breaking. Like I had a question later on. I'm going to bring it up right now. Actually, this is, you know, we talked about this, like the stigma is absolutely breaking. We can see now that more conversations are taking place. I don't think it's lame for people anymore to talk about it. And, you know, just 10 years ago, we didn't talk about it. It was weakness, quote unquote. I don't think anybody's seeing it as weakness now, unless you have kind of an old school mentality. But the thing that surprises me is that mental health, mental fitness is the number one concern of youth athletes and parents and their parents across the board now. I'd actually like to do research on what that was 20 years ago. I wonder if it was like ice time or something like that, right? But now, as of today, for everybody listening, for the number one concern of young athletes and their parents is mental health. Yeah. I think we've turned a corner, like I said, but I don't think we've gone far enough, because I think, like most things, we're acknowledging it now, but nobody knows what to do. And when you say things like a therapist or therapy, that's where the stigma kind of sticks its ugly head back up again of, oh, you're in therapy? I proudly say my family sees someone. All right. It's not a weakness to me. I want to see someone. We want to be the strongest family possible. And it's just like, it's all the time. It's just like going to the gym. You wouldn't say, I'm going to the gym to get stronger. And somebody goes, oh, you're doing that.
Oh my.
Oh no. So again, the question's for both of you here. What are some action items? What do you see really as experts in the space? What are the next steps that we need to take to continue to break down those barriers? And what are some action items for the parents listening and the coaches listening that we can do to further, you know, advocate for stronger mental fitness within the locker room?
Yeah. I think this conversation, right? I think at the end of the day, having conversations about sport specific mental health gives our athletes and our leaders permission to talk about it, because it exists. You know,
right.
All four of us sitting here on this call, we all have mental health. It doesn't just come in when we have an issue. It's like physical health. We have it all day, every day. So I think in so many ways, and Paul and I see this so often in our work, and Lee, you said it, that, you know, the awareness is there, but it's the now what,
right?
It's the like, okay, so what do we do? And how do we create a space where coaches and leaders and parents feel like they actually have agency and can do something here? So for me, it is really about bringing that conversation into the dressing room, into the rink, you know, not just having it on the ride home, but actually physically marrying the athlete and the leaders with mental health and specifically kind of sport specific mental health.
Right.
So I think that's an awesome place to start.
Agreed.
Yeah, I love how, sorry.
No, go ahead, Paul.
Well, I love how you said, Lee, that you proudly say that your family participates in therapy or whatever modality you do. And
we call it family team building, but it's we go to a therapist together.
Right on.
You know?
Yeah. And I love hearing that. And I think that's, like, we talk about modeling so much with coaches and the people around our young athletes. Model that, share that. And when you start talking about it openly, then that stigma reduces.
Right.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Thank you.
I think this is where, you know, I know where we are in USA Hockey from a coaching education standpoint. I know Hockey Canada does this as well in certain aspects, and they're probably getting better and better at it, is, you know, introducing these concepts, nutrition, mental health, you know, things outside of the role of a volunteer mom or dad hockey coach, right? Because it's so intimidating to coach anyway. And then to throw in the fact that you're supposed to be a mental health expert, and you're supposed to be a nutritionist, and you're supposed to, you know, be a top line scheduler. I mean, it's all those things that I think, you know, I think that's why, you know, reaching out to to folks like you and services that are offered is a support structure for the coaches, because we're not experts. I mean, it's really different. You know,
Right.
you could listen to a couple of podcasts and read a couple of books and see a couple of pamphlets, but you still need to, you know, engage with the professionals in this space. And I don't know, and to all your points, I mean, it is being more and more acceptable, but until the governing bodies make it a part of the actual education of coaches and not just how do you do a breakout and how do you teach power skating,
Yeah.
and then it becomes really hard, because, you know, coaches have a lot. I'm not talking about pro coaches. I'm talking about the volunteer youth hockey coach, 18U. Just like, okay, listen, I have a hard enough time getting to the rink, and now you want me to identify whether I'm talking to a child properly or not, and building up self-esteem or beating them up, or, you know, it's a lot to ask. But I do think if we educate people and let them know that there are services out there, then it's the obligation of the organization and frankly the coach to utilize that, and then explore how does that help my team the most, where it's not affecting, and has helped me the most, right? Because if you don't have healthy athletes mentally, how the heck do you coach them anyway?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And you said, you know, we get nutritionists, we get all of those things. And I think as coaches, and individuals, we would never I would never jump into that world with my athletes or whatever and say, okay, well, I can teach you what to eat to, or how your nutrition needs to look. I would never venture into that. And so when you come to mental health, we're not asking coaches to do that either.
Right.
You don't need to dive into that world and give all the answers. You just need to be kind. You just need to hear. You just need to notice. And then there's next steps, right? So that's one thing that's always very important to us, is we never ask coaches to step into those realms that they're uncomfortable with or that are beyond their knowledge, but simply being there and showing them that, oh, I care about this and I care about you.
Yeah, you know, one of the things about kids that I think we forget as we get older is how much as kids we just wanted to be heard, right? I just want someone to listen to me. And I think when we get to adulthood, and look, there's a lot of things that happen, but we don't afford a lot of children the let me just listen to you. I don't have to fix it for you. I want to listen to you. This is obviously the perfect segue to talk about what you two have created. But as Mike alluded to, right? I think that there's pressure on especially volunteer coaches of, I don't know how to do that, right? I know it's important, but I don't know how to do that. And you two have created something pretty amazing. You know, again, I'm jumping all over my questions here, which I love. It means we're having a good episode. But again, you founded Hone Athletics. We spoke about it in the open. It's a brilliant piece of technology, and I'll let you, you know, go on further if I get this incorrect. But basically, it surveys the athletes anonymously with questions dealing with the mental side of performance, and then it reposts them to the coaching staff in a way that they can just consume the information of how is my team, kind of where are they at. We talk about the importance of meeting athletes where they're at, and you've kind of created a tool to do that. So I think we should dive into where that came from, and then also please dive into how it works.
Yeah,
Sure.
I'll kind of talk about a little bit around where it came from. So Paula and I spent a lot of time working with teams around mental health. We certainly saw a niche and a need to address sport-specific mental health with teams. So we spent a ton of time I think we always call that our R&D phase, 5 years of really digging in and working with teams. And then in working with individuals privately as well. And what we saw was that, you know, our teams were wanting to learn more and wanting to have these conversations. And so we would do those sessions. We would ask the coaches to leave the room so that our athletes could answer honestly. And then without a doubt, 2 hours later, when we got home, we'd get a call from the coaches, and coaches would say, okay, what happened? What can I do?
Right.
Right. So, and in our heads, we were like, okay, we got to shift here. We got to shift, because this is about co-creating an experience, right? This is about having everybody a part of that conversation. So we said, coaches, come back into the room, and had these wonderful conversations, and looked at how we could really start to access and impact more athletes, and scale our services to a place where, you know, they didn't have to be in Calgary, Alberta in order to access us. So that really is a foundation for Hone. we're very well versed in kind of the sport specific research when it comes to mental health. So we took a lot of time making sure that we were creating something from sport for sport.
Right.
A lot of the time when it comes to mental health initiatives, we create them with non-athletes, and then we kind of plop them on athletes and say, hey, let's make this work. And it doesn't, because there's so many cultural nuances. There's so many very specific things that we need to be paying attention to when it comes to athletes. So we really created something specifically for athletes and specifically for that culture. And I don't know if I don't want to talk a little bit more about kind of how it works. It's very simple. It's very easy. I want all the coaches to stay on the call.
No, Jessica, I'll do it for you. Like everybody listening, I took a look at this. I don't think it could be any simpler.
Yeah.
It's actually so simple to the point I could see someone saying, well, it's too simple, right?
Yeah.
But that's at the end of the day, that's what you want, right?
I like it. Yep.
I think what's important too is to understand that, look, when I work with teams, and everybody listening has heard this, but I always start with trust, right? You have to build that trust because you're not going to get honest results or answers from anybody if the trust isn't there. But the second thing I talk to about coaches is do you know how to motivate your athletes? Right. And I know a lot. Like I just motivated them the way I was motivated. And I said that it's a huge mistake to assume that anyone's motivated the way you're motivated. So, I could see a coach playing a little bit of devil's advocate, Mike, and you can too. Like I like to bring up the funny objections and then support you. But I could see somebody, well, how is knowing how my team feels going to help me with practice? Because I plan this practice. And if they come back and say, I'm just not feeling great today, how am I going to do my practice? And it's a few things. Number one, it's not about you. It's not about you and what you created. It's about them. Right. And if they're not mentally in a place to receive the information, I don't care how good your practice is. It's not going to work. Now, again, I will make the argument this would work at the pro level too, but we are talking specifically youth athletes. Mike, I can see you chomping at the bit here. Go ahead.
It's just like doing lesson planning. Like maybe like if I'm a coach scared to use a platform like this, it probably says more about me than my athletes. Because I don't want to know what their mental health is, because then I got to deal with that. Like, if I have to deal with kids that have anxiety, or kids that don't like to get yelled at, or kids that need to be coddled, or kids that have other stressors in their life, that doesn't concern me as a volunteer coach. I'm like, I don't care what that kid's doing at school. Like, because that doesn't concern me. I don't care if their girlfriend just broke up with them, or, they have a fight with their boyfriend, or whatever it is. Like, and I think that's where it's so, that's why I got into coaching, because it's teaching, it's mentoring. It's not just about winning hockey games. Hopefully. I mean, there are a lot of teams that say, I don't care what your mental health is. I just need the top 18 athletes. And if you're a weak athlete mentally, then I'm just going to replace you anyway with a kid that in what I see on the surface looks like a strong athlete. But you guys could speak to this more than anyone. Like, how many athletes look strong that are really struggling inside, and that doesn't manifest itself until after they're gone from me, right? They're no longer with me, but at the end of the day, I have an obligation in that time I have them to help them, teach them, mentor them, not just to say, oh, please just get through the next 6 months and then move them on. And I think that's why, any addition to these type of programs is scary for a lot of adults, because then they're faced with the fact that they have to deal with it. It's almost like, like my wife's a therapist, and she'll talk about, her mandated reporting obligations about when she finds something out, like, and we're like, well, maybe I don't want to find that out. Like, I don't want to test a kid a concussion, because I don't want to deal with the fact that he has a concussion, and then I have to then react to that concussion. So it's just that's the way I see a lot of the mental health discussions, is the fear of having to deal with it, instead of just kind of burying your head behind it and not dealing with it. Now, on the other side of this, parents, advocate for this. Find the coach that wants to use this. Find the person that wants to, confront this head on, because it's going to save you many, many years of maybe even actually seeing and needing a therapist at another level outside of sport. And we're talking about sport, right? But there are human beings. These kids, they're only playing hockey with us, 3 or 4 hours a week. There's the rest of their life that's going on.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
I think about, Mike, when you said, you know, we don't want to deal. And I think we get this, we understand this. But I think about when an athlete's physically injured, and I think about that happening on the ice. What happens when an athlete's physically injured on the ice? What happens? We rush in to support that athlete. And maybe they broke their leg, maybe they did something, we send them to the hospital. We don't sit there and think to ourselves, oh shit, am I allowed to swear? Sorry, I shouldn't
Go
swear.
for it.
I mean, you know, I'm not splinting a kid in the locker room, right? I'm not putting splints on saying, hey, listen, I think you have a fracture of the tibia.
Exactly.
And no part of you thinks you should.
That.
Well,
Right. And no part of you thinks you should.
We
right?
make the kids kneel. We make the kids kneel on the ice as an acknowledgement that someone is injured.
Yeah.
Like, think about that. Yeah.
So we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Sport does a beautiful job of rehabilitating physically injured athletes. We just need to do it with mental health too.
Totally agree.
And when we talk about they don't want to deal with it, you are. Like, you're dealing with it. And when I kind of hear that, it makes me go to, like, you're dealing with it, but perhaps not extremely well if the head's in the sand, because it is there and they're showing up with it. And if you want a group of 18 players who you just want to be strong and get there, it's not mutually exclusive. You need them to be mentally okay. And that doesn't mean everybody's in amazing mental health, but that they're supported. Can make such a massive difference.
And I'll take the stigma a step further, just because I think, as you guys and Jessica, you said this so wonderfully at the beginning, it's about awareness, right? So I talked before about how my family sees someone. Well, the common question I get back is, well, what's wrong? What happened? Right? And it's like, well, you know what? We're trying to be the strongest family we can be.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not like I'm wearing a cast or something here. It's like yes, obviously we have every issue that every family has. We're just taking steps to become the strongest family we can be, and we don't regret that, right? And every single family has these issues, and every single family, some of them more, some of them less. I'll also mention too, we're very fortunate to be in a position where we can go do this. That's not true for everybody. All right. And this is also, though, where community and family plays a tremendous role, something I think we've gotten away from in recent years, where
coaches.
Right. Like, you used to be able to go, coach just wasn't your ticket to the next level, right? This was someone you could trust and buy into. And just from a societal level, I really love us to see us get back to more of a, it takes a village mentality. There's so much fear today about even letting anyone else talk to your kid, which I get. I mean, it's sometimes it's justified, especially with the web today. But anyway, I'm not trying to get off track. My point is, what both of you are making is that it's a strength builder to be mentally fit. All right. Also, let's flip it to the parents that might be like just trying to get their kids to the next level. This is an asset for your kid to be mentally strong. It's an asset. We all could say this. All right. I have seen, I just feel like I say this a lot. I have seen unbelievable talent, professional level talent fail because they don't have this piece. Right. Especially today. It is essential, if you would like your child to succeed really in anything, that you spend the time, or at least have the awareness of, maybe I should look into that. Hey, son, hey, daughter, how are you feeling today? I value those conversations with my kids when they're willing to have them, right? You can't force anything out of them. So, anyway, like I said, everyone's saying the same thing here, that mental health, mental fitness is important for the parents listening, for the coaches listening. Email us if you're not sure what to do, right? We'll hook up with these ladies, or, at least we'll point you in the right direction on something to do. Go ahead, Mike.
I don't want to override your questions either, but I mean,
I didn't ask one yet.
Where did you see? I know. I never ask questions. I'm sorry. I just bring out.
That's just the New York, Connecticut in you right there, Mike.
I'm just talking. But I'm wondering, like, where did you see the most need for this? Like, when you were doing your R&D, like when you were in there doing this, right? Where did it come to you and say, wow, if we could centralize this data, this information that we're getting, and anonymously, and it could support the coach, and support what we try to do with all our athletes as we're speaking with them in groups, and I understand you probably do teams, organizations, right? Organizationally, like, are we a healthy organization? So I think I'm just wondering, like, where that R&D led you to say, okay, well, how can we come up with the questions that we want to ask
Mhm.
to help coaches kind of move on from this.
Yeah, the first moment of us kind of walking into this world was with a group of, I think, 8th graders, and we didn't know what we were walking into, and they just started talking, and that's when we realized, oh, okay, they're willing and they want to. Like, we did not have to lead this conversation. They wanted to talk about how they were feeling, um, owning their behaviors, all these really cool things. What really stands out to me, Jessica talks about when we kind of thought we were geniuses and let's get the coaches out of the room and we can have this conversation and the kids can come up, and then everybody's talking to us and all these private conversations, and then we're like, oh no, we missed it completely, and bringing them back in. But I recall specifically one team, and we had a couple of players who would stay after the group every time and having very long conversations, and just recognizing that they felt rather powerless in what was happening, and there was nobody there that had influence on their environment to change it. And so that's when we needed to have that conversation with the coaches in it, to be like, stuff's going on and you need to know and you need to support them. And it's been amazing. It's been really amazing ever since to have done that and to share that information. And we don't, when we use the app, like I said, we take the guesswork out of it. So we've made assumptions on what's been going on, particularly during COVID, of what we would need to monitor. And so when we did the research on what kind of stressors impact young athletes and impact how they perform, it showed up with, relationships and stress and pressure and criticism and all of these things that are not diagnostic questions. We are not diagnosing disorders here. We are not diagnosing depression or anything like that. We're picking up on your stress. And then when we know which area it's in, we can start to support you for what you need as a team.
Do you see common themes, like a team of, like, say 18 kids? Do you see like this spike in where the stressors are? And then is that help me then as a coach say, oh wow, like I'm really affecting a big group of kids here, the way I'm teaching, as opposed to it's one or two that I don't know of. I mean, but I would imagine you could probably figure it out pretty quickly if it's one, right? And you say, my God, I can't believe I'm doing that. Like I don't know where I went kind of off the rails there. But if it's like anything else, right? If it's like in the hockey world, you hear it all the time, like, oh, all the parents are saying they're so upset about this. I'm like, who's all the parents?
Yeah, all of them.
Parents?
3 of them.
It's like I tell our coaches that I work with all the time. Listen, if you have 70% of your people on board with you, you're doing a great job. Keep it up. You're gonna have your name. But on the side of kids not being in a room parroting each other, but being privately being able to say, this is how I feel. Like they're not with each other, right? They're just, this is their own this is their own therapy, I guess, in a lot of ways, like getting it off their chest. But then you get to read read the room, for lack of a better term, and get to see, okay, wow, I'm like, these kids feel like they have no time to study, or these kids feel no social life, or they feel like they're at the rink too much, or what. I don't know what the questions are. I'll have to research that a little bit, but I think it's just really important, to see those themes, right? And then react to them.
And I'll speak into just, we have leagues or teams that have been in the app now for 3 years. And we've been able to look at the data at the end of the year and say, hey, it looks like your girls or guys are really struggling with pressure in November. Okay, so what can we do in October? What can we do in October to make sure that these athletes are feeling supported? So it becomes an incredibly powerful preventative planning tool. Not only is it co-creating the sporting experience in the moment, but we're also able to give organizations and coaches the opportunity, and parents the opportunity, to really better understand their athletes straight from the mouth of the athletes. Like I always say, this isn't like, we're not in there doing stuff and do whatever. Like, this is just helping us, the athletes and the coaches and leadership better communicate in a way where they feel heard, to your point, Lee, right? Like, these athletes feel like, oh, they see me and they hear me. And like, that is the most powerful tool, powerful, whatever you want to call it. I actually think it's funny. I just called it a tool.
It's a tool. It is. I mean, it's a lot of things, but it is a tool, is one of them.
So when, when you say, what can parents and coaches do? see them,
Yeah.
hear them,
Well,
make them feel like what you're saying matters. And it is simple, Lee. Like you say, the app's really simple. It is simple. It's one of our core values here at Hone is to provide the simplicity behind mental health.
Well, and I love that for it as a coach. You know, it's funny. I got a lot of notes here from what we all just said. I love that you brought up the word preventative, because so many people, this is a human thing. It's not a hockey thing, but so many people wait until the action happens. Oh, I broke my leg. I need to do something about that. Well, you should have been strengthening it instead of, you know, you're over 40. You probably shouldn't have been running anyway. You know, there's a lot of things you can do. My favorite one, and it just shows you kind of how unconscious, that's the word I'm going to use, we are to certain things, like the fact that every November to December, your team is going to be exhausted with each other. Every year I see it, and every year it's a shock. Well, I don't understand why they're not getting along. Right? It's because they've been together for 4 months, and you should have a good, healthy hatred for your teammates. That's the truth. Okay, joking aside, right? It's like the holidays are here, and then a lot of things happen. The holidays are wonderful for some families, and they are horrible for other families. How are we not anticipating that, right? So again, I love having the data, because you can, whenever you have data, you can point to it. It's like, no, it's there, right? I'm not making this up. But preventative stuff, you know, I always tell coaches when I work with them, you want to avoid winning. I mean, you want to avoid winning. Want to avoid losing streaks. You prepare for them before the season starts. You don't not talk about them. If we go on a losing streak, what are we going to do? The other note I have here that I thought was really important, and this is from what everyone said, right? First off, the environment has to exist for kids, actually coaches and parents, to express themselves, right? And I don't think we spend a lot of time in the hockey world creating the right environment for that to exist. When the environment's there, it's amazing what kids will share, right? When they feel like they can share. Then the other thing was this, and actually, Mike, you said something that made me write this down. And I think this is actually
nice.
There you go, Mike, you did it. You know, I talked on the show a lot about, for the most part, right? Coaches really do care about these kids deeply. We care about the kids we coach more than I think anyone realizes. And no coach that I know, no coach wants a kid to feel helpless ever, right? If you're okay with that, you shouldn't be coaching, right? So I think from a hockey standpoint, that kid's struggling on the breakout, right? You want that kid to feel confident. Mentally, we cannot have kids feeling helpless, like there's nowhere to go. I can't talk to anybody, because that leads to way deeper, I don't want to say problems. It just deeper mental issues that could really be detrimental years later. So I think having a tool, or having even the ability for the players to know, hey, they're listening. You don't have to be perfect at it, but they're listening. They actually care. I had a great coach mentor of mine that used to coach women's soccer at the college level, and she would ask her players before every practice, you know, thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs in the middle, how are you feeling today? And she would change her plans based on what the answer was.
I love that.
Nice.
Right.
Yeah,
No
awesome.
ego, right? It was like, well, we really need to work on this today, but if you're not mentally where you need to be, right? And the players obviously gave honest feedback on that. You know, everybody, I think, fears like, well, everybody's thumbs down every day. No, they wanted to practice hard. It's just sometimes they didn't have that. Go
I
ahead.
wonder too, Lee, if I actually don't wonder, I know that so much of the power of something like that is asking the question, not even just the response. The response is informative and it helps our coaches, and that's great, but it's
That's
also
a great point.
We have to be mindful of, you know, the power of having a tool like Hone and the impacts that it creates, just in the fact that we're bringing that into our team and into our organization. That is, you know, the foundation for starting this journey and creating this culture. And I think Paula speaks to the culture so beautifully, so I won't, but I think you hit on something so wonderfully, and that is, you know, how do we create that culture in sport to ensure that our teams, our coaches, our athletes, everybody knows that they can, you know, this is something we talk about here, right? This is something
I'm going to mirror your answer from the start of the episode. You have conversations about it. That's how you start to learn how to create those cultures. And it's a day one implementation, right? You don't wait. You don't wait to implement a culture, right? It's a day one, minute one of the meeting. here's the culture we're going to create, and here's what I want to establish. And, you know, maybe here's how I'm going to be vulnerable to your feelings, with the understanding that you need to give me the best that you have every day.
Yeah.
Right. We're not having those conversations.
No. And,
Right?
and the culture is going to happen. Culture happens.
Right.
So do you want to be at the front of it, or do you want to be kind of sweeping it up if something's occurred that somebody stepped in this culture? You're like, oh no.
Well, hey, let me
what's
talk to the
happening,
coaches.
right?
You're not going to win if you don't have it. Right.
No.
Yeah. I've never been
A
on a team
positive
that
team
won
culture.
where everyone hated each other. It
Mm-mm.
doesn't happen. Right. Go ahead,
No,
Mike.
it
Mike's
does
got,
not.
I'm looking at
No,
Mike.
I'm just saying, all your points are like our job is not to like break the kids. Like the job is not to like, oh, I'm going to break this kid. Like, you know, this is not like, it's not bull riding. Like, it's like at the end of the day, I just got to have a broken kid and then I can build him back up. Like, I don't know if that's, you know, I think that's just a hard, you know, way to go about working with youth athletes or any person. But I think it's just a matter of being proactively looking at tools to set yourself up. Like if I was building a program from day one in scratch, like you would say, okay, well, what are the tools that I need? I need these teaching training tools on the ice. I need these mental tools. I need these nutrition tools. I need all these different silos of where I want to have the pinnacle of my athletes, so that I, you know, ultimately to win, right? You're putting a program together to try to win. However you define winning with the age group you're with and the level you're at is really, you know, up to you. But if winning is, and Lee, we talk about it all the time, right, on this show, is if winning is the kids play again next year, then you won. You know, if that's the whole idea, is if we had kids that are playing and love coming to the rink and love the experience and love what you've done for them for that time you had them, then you've won. And if this could be a piece of that, and it should be, whether you use Hone or just dealing with mental health or having conversations or researching what you guys have done in the field, like that just helps. Like anything you can do to add value to your team outside of, you know, your 60-minute practice slot and your great scheduling ability, you know, is going to benefit your kids across the board. But again, we speak mostly to parents here, and parents demand this. Like parents should demand this be a piece of what you're the consumer. You're a parent. You're the consumer. You have the ability to have a $200,000 stake in each team, to have that team.
But Mike, the warm-up jackets.
Far more important.
The warm-up. No,
it's a great point.
I gotta go to Boston. I gotta go to Boston again next
year.
year.
It's an excellent point, though. And in all seriousness, that's kind of sometimes what it feels like we're up against. Right. Is the warm-up jacket. And it's like,
I said it for a reason.
Like, and I have a little guy, he's playing this year, and like I understand, like, you know, feeling like you belong and all that stuff's really important too. This isn't an either or for me at all, right? Because every single thing we do there's meaning behind it, and it's really, I think, creating and starting to say, hey, like, you know, we're doing this in sport. Let's do it intentionally, and let's ensure that we are providing our young people with what they need, not what we think they need, with what they need.
Yeah, no, Jessica, I agree with you 100%. And here's the thing: is that my gut tells me if you went to the parents and said, "Hey, for this little extra, you know, we're going to have a world-class mental fitness program that's really going to help the team win," which is true. Not gonna. I mean, they're going to go, "Well, we spend all this money." Okay. Like that's how those conversations really go. And again, I'm with you. Like, look, I'm also big as a coach on identity. I understand the value of wearing a logo on your shirt. I get it. I just think if we're not creating better people, what the hell are we doing? I'm actually going to use that to segue real quick. You know, I've had the real honor and privilege of interviewing a lot of people high up in the game. And it's funny, and even to the NHL level, one of the things I hear coaches say is that, you know, if you don't focus on the person as much as the player, you're not going to succeed long at the pro level. You know, we joke, Ted Lasso spoke a lot about this too, and people think that's a fairy tale show, but everything I saw on that show, I'm like, wow, this is really applicable to today's athletes.
Who wrote that show? Like
he did.
Jason
brilliant writing. Did he write?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Well, and the guy who played Roy Kent, he wrote it too.
Like they hit it so well. Anyway.
Right. No, I look, I bring up that show because I do a lot with that, and I personally lived in England for 3 years, so I have a lot of like things that go back and forth with that. but it's real. Everything they speak about outside the magical thing of the show, it's real. Those conversations are real. And again, when I look at the top level athletes, this is a huge part. Now, listen, at the NHL is going through a renaissance right now in mental health, kind of quietly. But we just saw it. I won't mention names, but a coach was just relieved of his duties for potentially infringing on, the mental well-being of his players. So the players are not standing for it at that level anymore. So one of the things I wanted to ask, Jessica, to you specifically, again, you've been around that level a lot. All right. You've witnessed a lot. In fact, in some of your bios, I read that, it's one of the reasons that you're in this field now is that you were able to kind of watch and see things. So what are some of the things you've learned, and maybe even some of the big changes you've seen, over time, because things are changing pretty drastically at that level?
Yeah. So, yes, I grew up around sport. Both my parents were actually coaches, and my dad a little bit more known than my mother, even though we're not going to tell her that.
You just did. What do you? No,
no, she won't listen, Jeff.
She won't listen. It's fine.
Fair enough. Right. We won't get a mailing address or anything.
Yeah.
Like that.
So my dad coached in NHL for 13 years, and then went on to, he became the CEO of Hockey Canada. So I was certainly around a lot of things and around sport. But one of the things I recall and have a memory of was I was working. I was going into university, and I was back in Calgary here working. I think my dad might have been in New York at the time, your guys' area. And I had two players come up to me and say, I don't know what was going on. They were playing there. I don't know what happened. And they said, your dad was my favorite coach. And it's like one of the most wonderful things of being and doing what we get to do now is we have, so many people come up and say that, which is such a cool thing as a daughter to hear. And every time I ask them why, their answer is always the same, always. And it's because he cared about me. He took the time to understand me as a brother, as a father, as a son, whatever it might be. So I think in so many ways, I always saw the value of the person. And marrying that with a highly competitive, I moved, I don't know, like 8 times. Like I understand both sides of it. I understand that winning matters, and I understand that people matter. And I think what my dad did well beyond his, quite frankly, well beyond kind of earlier on in his career, and we're seeing it now, but he always married the both. He always understood that winning was important, but never at the expense of the individual.
Right.
And I think so. I saw that, and to me, I don't, I don't know any different. Quite frankly, I think we have a tremendous opportunity for sport to be that vehicle, and sport to really kind of highlight how we have to be thinking and talking about the culture we're existing in addition to winning, because winning's really fun and it's a competitive event, like all these things, like those aren't lost on me at all, but I don't live in a world where those two can't exist.
Well, I think it's also important to note that there's lots of different ways to win. And I think we get so hyper focused on the big ultimate victory, which is very rare. Like a lot of people, we don't talk about that enough, that we forget there's a lot of wins in a hockey season, in a year, in your life, in your family. I'll say too, obviously it's clear that his influence and your mother's influence have imprinted on you, and that you're furthering that, and what's funny, Jessica, is that I remember being a young coach and kind of wanting to be at the NHL level and work at the NHL level. And that kind of happened. And it was not as fulfilling as I thought it was going to be. It was wonderful. Don't get me wrong. All right. But the older I got and the more I realized, wow, I can impact children. And when I became a father and I really started to understand that, man, that became a lot more important to me than just one ultimate victory. I'm not poo-pooing winning a Stanley Cup or anything like that. It is, it's a holy grail. I'm not saying that's not a worthy goal, but when I look at even the teams that are winning now, right, the coaches are loved by the players, right? If you look at Vegas, who had a real culture problem just a few years ago, and then they righted their ship, and those guys looked like they were having the time of their life. Or if you look at Colorado and Tampa and the way their coaches speak about the group and the people, like it, even if you were super devil's advocate here and one of these people like, well, all that matters is winning the Stanley Cup. And if they don't win it, they're worth, well, the coaches doing it are buying into this now. And the teams that are falling apart typically have old school coaches, right? That kind of, again, I'm not going to mention names, but they're kicked out of the league now.
I don't think you have to leave. I think we all know.
Yeah, I won't say any of them. But it's just one of those things of like the shift is there. So even for the non-believers, the shift is there.
Yeah.
But
it's interesting. I don't and I know I'm going to be very blunt here. I get what you're saying.
Yeah,
but
people love that. Here's a hot clip. Hot take.
What's a non-believer? What is a non-believer? So we don't believe that if we care about children and if we care about people, that good things are going to happen. It just doesn't. It doesn't connect.
I'll lean on Mike with this one too, but I see them at the rink weekly. Okay, and I'm not trying to be judgmental on anyone, but it's someone to me that is completely unconscious to what we're talking about, and just takes this mentality of if you're not first, you're last, right? And if you're not trying to be the best kid out there at the expense of everybody else. Like, and again, it's the crazy hockey parent that I'm alluding to. And again, I will say this too, and then Mike, please jump in. They are the minority, the crazy hockey parent. Okay. The good hockey parent, the good hockey coach that generally cares about these kids. That is the majority. It is just typically a silent majority. Right. But that's one of the reasons we made the show, is to let everybody know, hey, we're good. You're here. You found us. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, the detractors are always the ones that say, well, if we didn't talk about all this mental health stuff and we didn't bend to all the kids, we wouldn't have all these issues. Like we're it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? We let the kids talk, and then we realize that they have issues. I'm like, well, nobody had these issues 20 years ago. Well, no, they actually did. And matter of fact, you're a coach. If you really look back on it, you had these issues. And you didn't discuss them, and you didn't let that be explored, and you didn't have somebody supporting you. And then I say it all the time, just as far as even the way we coach just regular X's and O's and practices and training. We coach like we were coached until we're educated not to do that. Right. So we coach the same way. Every rink I walk into every single night, this whole week, I will see 25 kids in the corner doing 5-circle crossover drills for 25 minutes, and coaches will wonder why the kids aren't engaged or interested or learning. And I'm like, well, because your practice sucks.
I'm bored.
The kids are not engaged. They're not learning because they're bored. They're bored out of their minds. And it's the same thing with any any educational piece, right? We talked about it in the coaching education program. Like if you went to a surgeon and talking about getting an injury, right? And they said the surgeon pulled out like a saw and told you to bite on a bone because of the pain, you say, well, what the hell am I doing? But that was accepted at some point, right? It was accepted to have
not that long ago, to be fair,
not that long
200
ago.
years ago.
We've evolved. And I think that's in X's and O's. We've evolved our practices and how we teach kids. We've evolved in how we can discuss kids and allowing children and adults to discuss what we want them to discuss. So I think there are far too many people still out there, and I don't even know. I wouldn't call it old school. I would just call it, just people that aren't interested in developing and learning and evolving. Would be just like, hey, listen, these kids they just got to toughen up.
It worked for me.
Yeah, and
work for me, right? And I think that's, and again, and there are some things like listen, I will say 100%. I think just as a person in the trenches with kids, that they need discipline and they need a little bit more, accountability, and we have to not maybe do so much for them, as far as being prepared for games and practices. But I don't think not speaking to them and not educating them and not allowing them to voice their feelings and concerns is not one of them. But I think part of a holistic approach to, how we look at kids.
Yeah, it makes me think about something you just said. We would never hand young hockey players equipment and say, go put it on. And they've never seen it before, and then walk out the room and expect them to come out dressed.
And then yell at them for not having it on correctly.
Right. And so, but when it comes to mental health, we're like, take care of it. And then expecting them to show up ready to go. And it doesn't work. And I say to the coaches who are kind of skeptical and not really sure we'll go that direction, try, what would happen if you tried it? So A, you're either going to be proven correct, which you're not, or B, or B, something really cool is going to happen. And I wonder how, like, if, like, it does take vulnerability to do that. It, like, I
Yeah.
think about my time as an NPC, and that was, when I do that, it's one of my, I like myself most during that, because I love caring for them and working with them and doing whatever I can to help them achieve this incredible goal. So as coaches, like, how do you feel about how you're coaching? Is there, like, if we can reflect on that, is there a few tweaks that could be made? And is paying attention, is asking them how to, I had a professor who said every morning her kids got up, she would ask them the exact same question, a version of how are you, but it was the specific question she asked them every day. And if that answer changed from her child, she would be on alert. And so it's even just checking in every day. How are you doing? If fine, fine, fine. And if someday it's not fine, is that a little indicator that something's up? So it doesn't have to be massive things. Just letting them know that you're paying attention and you care.
You know, I'll say this too, Paula, taking this just way outside hockey for a second. Like, think about how we, everyone listening, react just when someone shows you a little kindness outside, right? Hey, thanks for doing that, or holding a door for you, or letting you in traffic. You know, think about how much it affects your day. That's a micro interaction, right? So we ignore those far too much. I actually I ran an experiment on my own social channels where I asked my audience, say, count how many negative micro interactions and positive micro interactions you have a day. I said, in my experience, 98% of the days are more positive than negative. We're just not kind of mentally trained to look for it. You know, we just kind of like let it pass by. I want to leave because we're running out of time here. Like I said, maybe it might be a second episode at some point. You know, I like to leave with actionable items. We've given a lot to the parents today. I think one I want to say, and then I want everybody to share, is, you know, about feelings, right? And that I think for the longest time, we told everybody to bury your feelings, don't show emotion, just gut through it. And what I've been saying to kids is, no, I like that you're feeling something. I want you to identify it. Tell me what you're feeling. And then I want you to control it so it doesn't control you. Right? Specifically at the younger ages. Well, I'm angry that we're losing. Good. That's good. You've identified it. Now I need you to control that and get back out there and work. Right? I think that's a far more valuable message of I hear you, I acknowledge you, right? You are angry and that's fine, or whatever. You're excited. It could be positive emotions too. Now control that emotion, because we'll become more emotionally aware. We'll have a more emotional IQ and intelligence if we can learn to control them. Burying them, it's just going to explode later. Again, good or bad emotions. So that's just the message I give to my kids. It's important to feel. I want you to feel, but I want you to control those feelings, not the other way around. Yep. Mike, what's your wisdom of the week? No, I'm just kidding. Let's.
No, I mean, honestly, I do that when I walk in the locker room. Like, I try to smile and be happy. Like even though I'm having, like, I have the most miserable day in the world, I just try to be happy when I walk in the locker room, because the kids react to that. Like, they see you walk in, get your dress. Come on, let's go. We gotta get on. And they're just like, it just sets this tone going on the ice. That's like, and even the kids too, because, you know, you can train. Like, I'll listen, I've done this for years and years and years, and I've really tried to, like, I'll even pinpoint kids to be like, hey, when you go in the locker room today, you gotta be smiling, put some good music on. The guys aren't feeling good. You know, we're not feeling great today. I can feel it. You as a coach really know your kid. You can kind of gauge where we're at when we're coming in, and a smile and a funny story and just saying hello goes such a long way with, like, and I work mostly with, like, you know, 16, 15, 14-year-old boys. And it's just sometimes you just got to force it out of them. You know, we joke around, like, turn that frown upside down, and the kids think but it's just, you got to do it. You force yourself to smile, and you're happy. I mean, and that's just, you know, a fact. So do more of that. And I think it's just, and Lee, we've talked about it a lot. I actually just did a little ride to the rink episode on it, just about, you know, going in and being deliberate in your role to be positive. Like, deliberately come up with plans that when you step into the rink, you are going to be in a positive place. And then healthy, everybody drives that, and then they drive you. Like, they lift you up too. And I think that's, you know, so it's hard to think about those things unless you kind of plan it.
Yeah. And I think I'm thinking, as you guys are speaking, you're both way more evolved than I am, because I'm thinking about with my kids and with, God love them, last night, and sort of trying to regulate and manage people's emotions. And I thought to myself, I just stopped and I thought to myself, like, I need to regulate myself right now, right? As the leader and as the coach. And if I, not to take this down a path, but like when we're talking about mental health and how we impact others, it starts here.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It starts with that leader, that coach, the mom, the dad. So many times, it's, for me, it's about pulling myself out of the situation and just checking in with me and being like, hey, where am I at? I might have to go lock myself in the washroom right now because I need 2 minutes, right? But like regulating this first. Yeah.
Jessica, I say all the time, and I'll use the word love. It's tough to give somebody something you don't have.
Yeah.
If you don't love who you are, it's very hard to give that to your children or somebody else. Yeah. But it's the same thing with what we're talking about, mental health. If you're not mentally strong, it's very hard to give that to your kids. I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying it's very, very hard. You got to check yourself. And look, to quote Ted Lasso, be curious, not judgmental, right? When I am losing my with my kids, and I'll say it just like that because every parent can relate. It takes me some time, but I'll get to a point of, okay, it's not them, it's me.
No.
Right. All right. Yeah. And I gotta really look inward and say, what do I need to do different to get the results? Even if it's something that they're not doing well, I'm obviously not responding well. Right. So I think
you're losing your nothing positive is going to come back.
No.
Right. It's not how it works.
Paula, I keep trying, like something's going to come back.
Yeah. The eternal parenting equation for 15,000 years. We tried.
But it's like coaches too, right? Like we're talking about parenting, but like it's coaches.
It's any mentor role is that if you're not curious and constantly evolving, and like one of the things I admire about Mike is how openly he talks about, and Mike even inspired me to do this on the show too. Like, yeah, when I was in my 20s and coaching, I sucked. I was a totally different coach, right? You have to constantly be growing and evolving. You can't expect the kids to do that if you're not willing to do that. So if you're the same coach that you were in 1996 today, all right, I'm dating. If you're the same coach you were in 2006 to today, right? That's not good.
And in my defense, I wasn't that bad then. Like then it was like you could like parents wanted that. They're like, oh my God,
I want you to punch my kid in the helmet.
Like I want you to grab my kid.
Don't do that, by the way, parents.
But I think this. But there's certain acceptable norms that we all went through. Like you could, like in the 80s when I was coaching, you could literally run kids until they puked their brains out. Like it was like oh my God, what a practice.
It was actually
everybody was throwing up, and it's like
it was expected, Mike. Like, to be fair.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't even admit to that, but I think it's just, but it's one of those things where it was almost like, oh well, those other coaches are doing that, so I need to do that. Like that's where winners are made. And then you find out, like, what do you mean everybody didn't do that? Like that, there was other people outside that did this other way of teaching, like Coach Renney, like they did different things to inspire their athletes. And you didn't know that. But I think there's no excuse now, because every piece of social media, everything on the web, everything you can look up, like you have the access of the library of the world to educate yourself of what the best practices are and what will get the best results. Or get the same results by doing it a different way. Let's do it the better way.
Well, Mike, I got to say this to you. And again, I was joking about you being bad, but like, listen, we didn't know what we didn't know, right? Like, so everyone's got to give everyone some grace. The coaches in the 1980s didn't know what they didn't know. You can't get on them for that, right? So, and I'm agreeing with you, but we know now, and that's the difference. It's like we know this now, so you have to adapt.
And we'll continue to learn, and we'll continue to find new things. And I think something we've a little bit lost sight of is allowing people to do better. Like once we figured out that, oh shoot, there's a better way, and somebody's willing to do that, how amazing to give them the opportunity to do that. Right. And what that will do for our young people. And our young people, we talk about young players right now. If they're talking about this now, what are they going to be like in 5 years?
Brilliant.
Like it's going to be amazing.
And I will say this, Paula, that having worked with 6 to kind of 10-year-olds over the last few years, a lot more than normal, they're better at this stuff than the adults.
Mhm.
Right. And it's like, I do wonder in 10 years when that kid's 18 and they've had 10 years of really mental fitness training.
Mhm.
I mean, are they going to school me in terms of like,
Mhm.
coach, you're really not in touch with your emotions right now. You could do stronger than that. And then it's going to be on me to be like, you're correct.
Well, listen, after
So-
this episode's come out, if this episode comes out and I get a timeout, then I might be a little more upset. But I will say,
Yeah.
but I think, coach, you got to go take a timeout. But again, I think it's just you're absolutely right, Paul. It's like, okay, we're hopefully inspiring the next group of athletes that are going to just, this is how they were coached. Like, I don't know, this is how I was coached. My coach never skated me into the ground, or he never disciplined me for something outside of my control. Like there are things that you have held people accountable for, and things that you have to coach kids up on. And I think it's just a matter of saying, if you can make better people coaching our kids, the more and more we get that, the better the sport becomes. And maybe, I think in a lot of ways, the bigger the sport becomes. Right. So, if you're a governing body, you're like, I want more kids playing. That's my goal, is the goal. And more healthy kids playing. Not, you don't want to kind of detract from what the sport can bring to you. And if you told to any governing body in Canada or the US that we have a program we could put in place that's going to give you more athletes for longer periods of time, and if you told me it was like a new shooting technique, everyone would do it. Right. So it's like, oh my God, you could use like that, like the stick they have now that has a little curve in it. So you get more leverage in it. People are like, that's a wacky looking stick. Like, I would never use that. But until somebody starts using it and scoring like 50 goals a year, all of a sudden somebody's like, ooh, that's a good stick. Like, all of a sudden the stick changes, right? So, straight bladed sticks to curve sticks.
Yeah.
It's the same idea. It's like, okay, we have a new tool that's going to retain more people and make the level higher, and in this case, healthier.
Yeah.
You got to, how are you not looking at that?
Yeah.
And hone athletes and hone coaches win. They do, just not at all cost.
That's a good statement right there. So, Paul, listen, I'm going to close this out. I didn't give you a chance for any final tips. I know we're a little over time, but did you want to say anything to the audience before I close this?
Oh, I feel like it did. No, I'm a little lost.
I feel like you did too, to be fair.
I had something in my mind, but no, I'm good. Yeah.
Okay. Well, listen, you two have been fantastic guests. Again, I love episodes where if I learn a lot. That means I know it's going to be a good episode for the masses out there. And I just want to thank you both for coming on today, Paula and Jessica, for being part of Our Kids Play Hockey. This was a great episode.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. If you want to hear all of the episodes, they're at ourkidsplayhockey.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you like this, please give us that 5-star review on Spotify or Apple or wherever you listen. And join our Facebook group, Our Kids Play Hockey private group. Got 2 questions to answer. And as always, if you need to email us with anything, if you want to learn more about Hone Athletics, team at ourkidsplayhockey.com. And I'm guessing it's honeathletics.com still to this day, right?
It is.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you next time on Our Kids Play Hockey. Skate on. We hope you enjoyed this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Make sure to like and subscribe right now if you found value wherever you're listening, whether it's a podcast network, a social media network, or our website, ourkidsplayhockey.com. Also, make sure to check out our children's book, When Hockey Stops, at whenhockeystops.com. It's a book that helps children deal with adversity in the game and in life. We're very proud of it. But thanks so much for listening to this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey, and we'll see you on the next episode.